Our next speaker, Eric Termuende, is a globally recognized keynote speaker that has been on literally hundreds of stages and worked with category-leading companies from all over the world. His best-selling book, Rethink Work, has been a go-to resource as we collectively navigate the future of work. And as a co-founder of Now of Work, Eric spends his time studying incredible leaders and is here today to share what separates those that thrive in the future of work from those that simply make it. He's been featured in the Globe and Mail, Financial Post, Forbes, Fast Company, Inc., and many, many more. Because of the incredible transformation he enables his audience to achieve and experience, Eric is one of the busiest speakers in the world. Today, you're going to find out exactly why. Please join me in welcoming Eric Termuende.
All the way in, all the way in, all the way in. Good to see you, Phil. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you. Oh my gosh, I'm just going to take center stage for 1 second and just a moment of gratitude, I suppose. I've been an attendee of the Art of Leadership for years now. It has been a milestone, a goal of mine to be here in the greatest city in the country in front of you to take this stage, a 7-year goal in the making, and I'm just grateful to be here with you today. So thank you very much for being here. I'm supposed to come out with like guns a-blazing, firing from the hips, helping us understand a little bit more about the future of work. Unfortunately, that's not the case today. I'm coming out here with my tail between my legs, a little bit embarrassed, and perhaps with a bit of a confession. I've been studying leadership, culture, and the future of work for the better part of the last 10 years. Tens of thousands of surveys, hundreds of organizations from across the world. The truth is, I thought I had the future of work figured out until about 3 years ago. Then I learned really quickly that I'm really bad at predicting the future. Maybe you are too. Did anyone expect that this would be the #1 commodity in the past 2.5 years? Or that this would be the #1 show on Netflix? Are you kidding? How about this guy? It seems like every 2 hours there's a brand new headline with some new Neuralink, Twitter, boring flamethrower. I have no idea what's coming next. But before lunch, I promise there will be another headline coming out of this guy's mouth or maybe this guy's tweets. I never would have expected that the hottest rental unit with the shortest tenure on Airbnb would actually be 10 Downing Street this year. That caught me by a bit of a surprise, for sure. And I didn't think that FTX, the whole crypto, I mean, maybe we could have predicted a little bit of that, but to the extent that we've seen, absolutely not. And even more recently, I certainly didn't expect that Taylor Swift would be breaking Ticketmaster and Live Nation. I didn't see that was going to happen either. All that to be said, there are a few things that are fairly predictable. You know, the trends sort of allude to the next things happening. For example, the 3 most common words in 2022 are actually the same as the 3 most common words in 2021 and 2020. The 3 most common words in 2022 are still "you're on mute," right? So yeah, right, some things are a little bit predictable. Actually, another one is this idea of the Great Resignation. Quick show of hands, who's heard of the Great Resignation, maybe experiencing it, talent issues right now? Here's the funny thing about the Great Resignation. In Canada, it's actually not really happening. If you take a look at the last 2.5 years, the turnover rate is about 28%. Now, some of you might be thinking, that's actually pretty high, to which I probably agree, and we're going to help talk a little bit about why that might be high today. But if you look at the 2.5 years before that, and the 2.5 years before that, and the 2.5 years before that, actually, the turnover rate is about the same. So the Great Resignation in Canada isn't really happening. However, there is something that's happening right now that we do need to talk about, and that is that we have a labor market shortage, a labor force shortage that we haven't seen in years and years and years, actually about 50 years. The numbers just came out on Friday for last month that the unemployment rate in Canada is about 5.1%. We haven't seen these numbers since 1971. It's been over 50 years, which is staggering. The truth is, 50 years ago, our labor force was half the size as it is today. What's happening? We're seeing that fill rates are lower than they've almost ever been, which means for every job posting you put out right now, every 2 job postings you put out right now, only 1 of those job postings is going to get filled. And the help wanted word counts, if you look at Google search results, is actually going through the roof. The question is why? Now, a lot of us love to think that COVID is the reason for this labor market shortage, this new world of work. And the truth is, COVID isn't the reason. It is the catalyst. It's part of the reason why it's happening faster. But there are some economical, some demographical trends that are really causing this labor market shortage that we haven't seen again in 50 years. Does anyone want to take a guess as to what's happening around the world right now? I'm looking at the front row. Just shout it out. What's happening? Aging. Yeah, we saw aging. Anyone over here? Reproduction is true. Anyone over here? One more? Yeah, exactly. Technological change. Let's talk about each of these a little bit because all of you are bang on. The first one is that our birth rate is lower than it's ever been. Here in Canada, every woman is having about 1.4 children, which is low. In fact, it's 30% lower than it was just 15 years ago. And I think I can actually share with you an exercise that gets us to experience how birth rates have started to decline. So I want you to think about this for a second. I want you to think of your mother or your father, or your grandparents on either side of your family, okay? And I want you to think about each of these 6 people, and I want you to think about which one had the most siblings, okay? And I want you to raise your hand if your parents or your grandparents on either side had 3 or more siblings. I can't see, I'm gonna come down here. Okay, keep those hands up. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. What's the number here, sir? 14. 14. Can anyone beat 14? What's the number? 23? Who's clapping? What are we clapping for? My gosh, 23. Okay, so that begs the next question. Does anyone have 23 kids? No, I didn't think so. We're reproducing less than we ever have before. Here's another quick question for you. Does anyone want to guess why the number one reason why millennials and Gen Zs are reproducing less than they ever have before? Go ahead. Climate change is the number one reason. Turns out that 33% of millennials and Gen Zs don't want to reproduce because, indeed, of climate change. Another thing that's happening is, wait a second. What, did I just sneak that in there? Let's back it up. I'd say the only chance really at a sustainable population growth is probably this guy, right? Retirement. People are retiring now faster than we've ever seen before. Take a look at these numbers. Yes, they're US figures, but we could take about a 1-to-10 ratio and see what's happening here in Canada too, right? If you look at 2010, 2020, about 10,000 people in the United States were turning 65 every single day. And so if we think that a lot of people are leaving the workforce right now, just give it 5 years. Some of you might say, well, the 75 is the new 65, to which I say, okay, well then give it 10 years. More people are leaving the workforce, less people are entering the workforce, and immigration, especially over the past couple of years, has been nearly at a standstill. We need these people more than ever before, especially with our economic growth. Then we heard it here, technology is changing the world of work too. We're seeing business applications, new business applications at rates that simply didn't exist in the past. And a lot of us think that this is that next generation, the millennials, the kids, those digital natives. The truth is, it's all of us. I'll give you a quick story. At the start of the pandemic, a single mother who was a bookkeeper was unfortunately laid off from her job. Too much uncertainty, not enough work. She was laid off from her job. She went home to her 10 and her 12-year-old, just with her head in her hands, wondering how in the world was she going to care for her kids. Her 12-year-old said, Mom, why don't you do the same work that you've been doing, but why don't you put your job posting online? Who knows what's going to happen? So sure enough, she did. She said, I'll take care of your bookkeeping every month and everything else that you need for $400 a month. 30 days later, she had 28 new clients. She made a hire, she tripled her salary, and she never had to leave her kids again. New business applications are happening at rates that we've never seen before, all fueled by technology, which we heard in the front row here. The World Economic Forum says that we're entering the 4th industrial revolution, one where we're not moving steps forward anymore, we're moving exponential leaps. So I want you to think of the first industrial revolution. Think of the steam engine, 18th century. The second industrial revolution, think of the assembly line. The third industrial revolution, the technology that got us to the moon, early computing. Think of our cell phones, which, by the way, have about 10 times the processing power that the rockets did that took us to the moon in '69. And then, of course, we're entering the 4th industrial revolution, where we're not moving steps forward anymore. We're moving exponential leaps. Now, I think a lot of us intuitively know that. We hear this all the time. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, computing, all these big words that say the world's moving faster and faster and faster. Now, look, I'm not that much of an academic, but there is a theory that I thought I'd share with you that helps us put all of this into a box that we can start to see and understand a little bit further. Coined by a gentleman by the name of Buckminster Fuller in 1958, who was actually responsible for the Agrodome in Montreal too, which I thought was just a nice little detail. He was studying the speed of information, communication, and technology, and how much the world around us knew as a result of that information. What he found was that before the year 1900, the amount of information that we had access to doubled every 100 years. So from 1700 to 1800, the amount of information that we had access to, well, it doubled. And from 1800 to 1900, it doubled again. Now, that didn't mean you and I were twice as smart. It meant the world around us had twice as much information every 100 years. But what he noticed was that after the year 1900, the amount of information that we had access to started to double at a halved rate. So now it didn't take 100 years to double, it took 50. And then it took a halved rate again, so 25, and then 12 and a half, and then 6. So from 1900 to 1950, the amount of information that we had access to, it doubled. And then from 50 to 75, it doubled again, to 88, it doubled again, to 93, it doubled again, until all the way back in 2020, IBM confirmed that because of the internet and the build-out of the Internet of Things, this will lead to the doubling of knowledge every 12 hours. Whew. That's pretty incredible, isn't it? So if we think the pace of change is fast right now, if we think economic uncertainty is high right now, this increase of information, of knowledge, of the chat functions that Sean was sharing just a couple hours ago, this will lead to a world of work that continually requires to reinvent itself. So I'm hoping, through our time together, I can answer one question. If the future is impossible to predict, which I think we can agree is true, and the talent shortage isn't going anywhere, how do we build teams that thrive in the future of work? What I've got for you is what 10 years of research shows allows us to be incredible leaders and build incredible teams. It's almost like a bit of a playbook, a blueprint to leading in that new world of work. And truthfully, it's as simple as coming down to 3 things. We need to, as Yasmin said, build a deep sense of trust. We have to be able to isolate and remove friction. And finally, we have to be able to create this culture of experimentation. It's those 3 things, that simple. And if you want resources from anything that you're going to see today, I'll have a QR code at the end. You can maybe put your pen down, just relax, and take it all in. Because I want to share with you how exactly we can first build a deep sense of trust in this sequence of 3 very important steps. Now, a lot of us intuitively know the importance of trust. We know what good trusting relationships feels like. The problem, though, is that very rarely do we understand how to build trust. What's the system? What's the operations? What's the framework to be able to build trust across our teams? If the world is going to continue to get uncertain, do we want people running for the exits when uncertainty hits, or do we want people running for each other and helping each other out? This is the power of a trusting relationship. Now, I'm a Canadian through and through, so I'm not a huge National Football League fan, but I am a fan of the leadership of this gentleman. His name's Kevin Stefanski. He's in the orange tie. And a few years ago, he was awarded a bit of a promotion, okay? He was promoted to be the head coach of the Cleveland Browns football team. And the way I see it, Stefanski had 3 strikes against him, okay? The first strike is that when he was assigned to be the head coach, he had never been a head coach before. He was a rookie head coach, a pioneer, a trailblazer in his own right. The second strike, for those of you that know, is indeed the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns are horrible, like really bad. Like 9 of the last 10 years, they were dead last in their division, okay? In 2017, they didn't even win a single game. And when they finally won a game in 2018, the city threw them a parade. I don't know if they're mocking them or celebrating them at this point, but they're not a good team, okay? Now, the third strike against Stefanski is that he was promoted to be the head coach in the first wave of the pandemic. So not only could he not bring his team together to work on drills and fundamentals in place, he couldn't even have them in the same room. So what was Stefanski, this rookie coach on a losing team in the first wave of the pandemic, what was he going to do to bring his team together and turn them around so that finally they could be a winning football team? Well, he knew the importance of trust, communication, collaboration, psychological safety. He knew that he had to get his team talking to each other. And not to just see them as players, but to see them as people. He didn't want them to see him as leader or as coach. He wanted them to see him as Kevin. So he got his team together over Teams and over Zoom. We're talking 55 grown macho men. He said, fellas, I want to try an exercise with you. I call it the 4-H drill, which, by the way, we can all use the 4-H drill in our teams as well. He said, I want to share with you my heroes, my heartbreaks, my hopes, and my histories. Now, you might think that his heroes were legendary coaches in the NFL, and that's not true. His heroes were his parents, and he shared with his team all of the incredible sacrifices that his parents made to give him the opportunities that he has today. He said, I want you to know who I am as Kevin, not as coach. And he shared with his team his heartbreak. He shared how he had this heartbreak in high school. I think a lot of us know that feeling. That heartbreak in high school that just shattered him. Had him playing that emo music up in his room far too loud, right? We've all been there before. Anyways, he said, this heartbreak, it pushed me into football. It gave me that grit, that resilience, that tenacity, that work ethic, all the characteristics and traits that I'm most proud of today. He said that heartbreak actually pushed me to meet the wife that I have today and the 3 kids. Fellas, that heartbreak was the best thing that ever happened to me. And as he shared more and more, you could almost see the defensive walls of his team start to come down. They went from arms crossed to like leaning in just a little bit more. He shared what his hopes were. Not to win the Super Bowl, that's an obvious one. He shared what his hopes were for his family, for his kids, for the city, for the country. He shared what he believed in. And then he shared his history, not his football history. He shared his first rock concert that he went to. He shared all of the things that made him uniquely him, his favorite restaurants, his favorite types of food, all of the things that were just uniquely Kevin. Now, Kevin knew the importance of a psychologically safe organization, one where everyone on the team feels that they can share without fear of reprimand, without fear of being judged, without fear of being looked down upon. And so he knew that he couldn't force anyone to share something as vulnerable as the 4 H's, so he didn't force. Instead, he invited. He said, hey, does anyone want to share just one of your 4 H's? To which one player, I'd say he raised his hand. He probably pressed the raise hand button. He said, yeah, coach, I'll share with you. He said, I'll share with you one of my heartbreaks. He said, it's not actually a heartbreak. It was a torn ACL. And in 2017, I tore my ACL. And I think everyone knows that as soon as I could start walking, it was basically everything from the day I could start walking to the day I tore my ACL. It was everything that I could do to make it to the NFL. So when I tore my ACL, I thought it was over. We're talking like 15 years of training hard. I thought I was done. But then I got paired with this physiotherapist. Gosh, he just worked magic. I would say he rehabilitated me to 120% because I'm better now than I was then. But he said, coach, that's not the best part. He said, I got married 8 months ago. My physiotherapist was the best man at my wedding. I gained a best friend throughout the process as well. Another player raised his hand. He said, coach, it's my hope, but it's not really my hope. It's more of a mandate. I'm doing it now. He said, my father left us when I was 2 years old, and my mother, she started to work 2 jobs and do everything that she possibly could because she saw in me that maybe I could be here one day. And I know that I'll never be able to fully repay her, but I'm going to do all I can to bring as much of my salary back to her so that not only could I transform her life, but I could transform the community around her as well. She's such this beaming, this radiant light of positive change that I know the world around her will be a better place when she has the resources that I'm going to be able to give her. One by one, players started to share more and more about their 4 H's to the point where it was so successful, Stefanski said, stop, hold on. You guys are talking over each other too much. I can't hear what you're saying. So over the next 3 weeks, they shared a little bit more. People started to share more about their 4 H's. And as they shared more about these 4 H's, you could see the roots of this team just grow into the ground. The foundation on this new Cleveland Browns become rock solid. People started to collaborate. They started to laugh. They started to joke. They started to slap each other on the shoulders when they finally got back together. And they started to play better football. September 2020, a brand new Cleveland Browns team takes the field after their new head coach had only been in that position just for a mere matter of months. The Cleveland Browns team ended up being 11-5 in 2020. They made it to the playoffs for the first time in 17 years, and they won a playoff game for the first time in 28 years. Stefanski, the rookie head coach on the Cleveland Browns in the first wave of the pandemic, he was awarded the Coach of the Year award that year for the transformation that he made with his team. After that final loss, he went to the press conference to which everyone wanted to ask him the question, Stefanski, what was your secret? How did you turn this team around? He said, I don't know if I have a definitive answer, but I will tell you this. When my team trusts each other off the field, they play better together on the field. Like, gosh, that really stuck with me. When my players trust each other off the field, they play better together on the field. Here's a question for you. Do you know who your players are off the field so that we can play better together with them when we're on the field? Because here's what I've learned. Trust? Well, trust is a lot like gas station sushi. What? I was filling up my... I got an applause. I haven't even started the joke yet. I was filling up my Jeep 2 days ago, actually, and I came in from Vancouver. Maybe I should probably tell you that. And both one of the good and the bad things about that is that we love to brag about our knowledge of good sushi, okay? Like, I think I'm like this close to mercury poisoning. It's become a bit of a problem. So I went with my partner for sushi the night before that, and I went to go fill up for gas the next day. And I'm in the gas station. We've all seen it before, that gas station sushi lined up. And I got to tell you, having just had sushi the night before and probably the night before that, I'm looking at this sushi, I'm thinking, dang, that looks pretty good. It looks pretty good. Did I buy it? No, of course not. If I bought it, I probably wouldn't be here today, right? I'd probably be, no details on that, but I probably wouldn't be here today. So as I'm walking out of the gas station, I'm scratching my head thinking to myself, why didn't I buy that gas station sushi? And it dawned on me that I didn't buy the sushi because I didn't know anything about it. And because I didn't know anything about it, I didn't trust it. I didn't know if it had been there for 5 minutes or 5 days. I didn't know if it was caught fresh that morning or flown in from across the country. I didn't know if it had been frozen and thawed, or if it was made fresh by the resident sushi chef in the back of the gas station. I didn't know any of these things. I could assume, but I didn't know any of these things. And because I didn't know anything about it, I simply couldn't trust it. Now, I know that a lot of us are in leadership positions. We have a lot of roles, a lot of responsibilities, a lot of deadlines, a lot of huge weight that's on our shoulder, that requires us to delegate, requires us to get help to do it, requires us to utilize the teams that we've worked so hard to build. But it's tough to pass along this responsibility when you don't know who you're passing it along to. At the end of the day, it's probably your name on the piece of paper, on the email, or on the report that goes out to the person at the end of the week. And I found that the more we can learn about the people around us, the more we'll be able to trust them too.